President Trump is moving with light speed to enact the agenda that he campaigned on, from pipelines to the border wall, from abortion restrictions to the violence in Chicago. The administration is sprinting out of the gate on his priorities. Joining us now with reaction, Maryland Congressman Steny, the #2 Democrat in the U.S. House. He's with us from the Russell Senate Office Building through our Connect to Congress series of interviews. Mr. Hoyer, as always, thanks very much for your time.
Bruce, thanks for having me. Good to be with you.
Great to have you here. You've been in office over a long span of time that has covered numerous presidents of both parties. Have you witnessed a moment like this?
I don't think any of us have witnessed a moment like Donald Trump becoming president of the United States. I think he's unlike any candidate I've seen. I'm not sure that's good news. I think there's a lot of reasons that previous presidents, both Republicans and Democrats, conservatives and progressives, have been much more thoughtful, in my view, in approaching their responsibilities on policy. And I would hope that President Trump would be thoughtful, would take time. Campaigning and governing are two different things. It's easy to say quick sound bites and get a quick Twitter pronouncement. It's much more difficult to fashion policy which will have a positive effect, not a negative and destabilizing effect. And if you move too quickly, without the thought, without the analysis, I don't think that's particularly helpful to the country.
Does moving quickly in a wide range of areas at one time make it less likely that he will accomplish his set objectives, and does it make it more difficult for opponents to mobilize and harness the things they need to do to push back and offer alternative ideas?
Well, I certainly think it makes it more difficult. When you say opponents, it makes it more difficult to have debate and consideration of actions that are taken and to contemplate thoughtfully their consequences. I think clearly that makes it more difficult. So from the standpoint of a proponent of an idea like President Trump, yes, you can move quickly, you can get it done, and the opponents or the other view will not be heard. But what happened, Donald Trump as a candidate, now that he's president, Donald Trump as a candidate said it's going to happen in the first hour I'm president, or the first days I'm president. He put a premium on speed of objectives, and he's showing that that kind of action and following through on what he said he was going to do. But again, the price you pay is not having the thorough consideration and analysis that I think you need for good policy.
Let me ask you about health care. All of your House colleagues are up for re-election in 20 months or so. Are any of your Republican colleagues expressing privately concerns about the second half of the repeal and replace mantra? Are they saying things privately that they might not be saying publicly in terms of what happens to people going forward if the plug is pulled on the Affordable Care Act?
The answer to that is yes, they are saying that privately, but more importantly, they're saying it publicly. There are 12 members, Republican members of the United States Senate, who in one way or another have said that they have great reservations about repealing the Affordable Care Act without having an alternative replacement ready to go contemporaneously with the repeal. As a matter of fact, President Trump said exactly the same thing, that he wanted to repeal quickly, but that he wanted to put in place an alternative at the same time. The fact of the matter is it was easy to say for a long period of time, as Republicans have done, the Affordable Care Act is not good, we're going to repeal it. And they offered 64, 65 times to repeal the Affordable Care Act. They're a little bit like the dog who now has caught the car. They think they have the ability to do that. And again, the consequences of doing that have been made clear. And the American people have now said, you know, we're not sure that's what we wanted at all. And as a matter of fact, about 70% of the American people say, do not repeal until you have a replacement. And now the Affordable Care Act has for the first time in a significant period of time, gotten more people in favor of the Affordable Care Act than have been against it. Now, it's been close on either side, but I think the reason for that is the American people now are really looking at what the Affordable Care Act has done for them, has done for their parents, done for their neighbors, done for friends that they know. And they're seeing that if you repeal the Affordable Care Act, you're going to put at risk not only those who have participated in the marketplace formed by the Affordable Care Act, but all people who have insurance, and that the probability is all insurance premiums will go up. It also puts at risk the fact that if you have a pre-existing condition, that's okay, you can still get insurance. It puts at risk 26-year-olds and less being able to stay on their parents' policy. It puts at risk the prohibition on annual limits or lifetime limits, so that so many families have gone bankrupt in the past because their health care costs overwhelm them. It puts at risk the ability to oversee health insurance companies and make sure the premium dollars are going to health care and to their health care. So there are an awful lot of things that the Affordable Care Act does that people like and want to keep. Seniors in particular have seen both their preventive visits, preventive health care, not have a copay, so it didn't discourage them from getting preventive care, which would save us money in the long run and save them money in the long run. In addition, their prescription drug prices have been substantially reduced by the... Go ahead.
I apologize. I have to ask, given this area and the number of federal employees who work in this area,
right,
what's ahead for agencies? What's ahead for federal workers? As I understand it, there's a national park, I believe in South Dakota, that has a Twitter account that has continued to tweet out facts about the environment in direct prohibition of an edict out of Washington that agencies are to suspend communication until the Trump team presumably can get in place and put their imprint on things. Can we expect down the road that that facts about our economy or any other aspect of life can continue to flow to the American people, even if they're inconvenient, even if they run against the grain of what facts you might wish, whether it's unemployment or climate or any of a million things?
Bruce, I think the American people need to be very concerned about this. It's clear that the president does not like inconvenient truths, and as a matter of fact simply denies that they're so. And that's happened throughout the campaign. We see recently where he believes that there are 3 to 5 million votes that were cast by people who were not eligible to vote. There is no evidence of that. There's no evidence of that from Republican Secretary of States, Democratic Secretary of States who run elections. It's simply not a fact. But it is inconvenient for him to recognize that the majority of, or the plurality of Americans, more Americans, about 3 million more Americans, voted for Hillary Clinton than voted for Donald Trump. Yes, he won the Electoral College. Yes, he's a legitimate president from that perspective, consistent with our Constitution. But the majority of Americans did not support him for president. His defense on that is, oh, well, there are 3 to 5 million illegal voters. He now says he's going to have an investigation of that. We welcome it, because Republicans have claimed for years and years and years that there were voters going to the polls who were not eligible to vote. We don't think that's the case, and we welcome an investigation of that. But with respect to the federal government agencies, Americans expect to get the truth. Americans expect to get the facts so that they can make informed decisions on public policy. If, in fact, agencies are now precluded from giving them the facts, clearly, if agencies are wrong or giving them bad information or incorrect information, any administration would want to stop that. And, in fact, the agencies themselves, the oversight ought to stop that. But to say to government agencies, you can't put out information other than the information we want you to put out, what you're doing is politicizing the entire federal government. You're undermining civil service. You're undermining the truth to the American people. I would hope that's not what President Trump wants to do, and that in fact the agencies will continue to be able to convey to the American people facts within their spheres of knowledge, so that Americans will know what's happening and can make sound decisions.
We have about a minute left, Congressman. Thanks as always for your time. There was an enormous march here in Washington, and there were similar gatherings around the country, quite striking in terms of the size and the energy. The next election isn't for 2 years. How does the left begin to mobilize and organize? There need to be some tangible things to be able to patch this kind of raw, unfocused energy too, right? Or otherwise, the risk for your side is that it dissipates.
Well, my side, and let me say, Bruce, I don't think everybody fit into one cookie-cutter ideology in the march in Washington, the Women's March, or the marches around the country and around the world. I think there were conservatives, moderates, liberals, progressives, call them what you will. And there were an awful lot of people involved that did not fall into an ideological cookie-cutter definition. They are concerned. They're concerned about their rights. They're concerned about the American Constitution. They're concerned about people being treated for what they do and not who they are. They're concerned about their legal rights to choice under the Constitution of how they access health care. So that I think there was an expression that we're not convinced that our new president is going to protect our rights and act in our best interests. And again, the majority that voted in the presidential election, the plurality, more people voted for the policies that were put forth by Hillary Clinton than voted for the policies put forth by Donald Trump. And they're concerned. They want to express that concern. And Bruce, I think you're right. I think the advice to them is, look, if you want to make a difference, marching one day is very, very impressive. But you need to march every day. You need to organize every day. You need to participate every day. You need to run for office. You need to get out and register and vote if you're going to impact in a democracy decisions going forward. And I think that's what we're recommending that they do, and I think that that's what they're going to do, and we'll certainly help them do that.
Maryland Congressman Steny Hoyer, the #2 Democrat in the U.S. House. Congressman, as always, thank you very much for your time.
Bruce, can I just say something? I know you've got time, but I want to congratulate you for the extraordinary role you have played for WJLA, for the Washington metropolitan area, and for our country. I hope we continue to hear your voice and good sense and balanced view. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you. It's very kind of you to say. And 35 years ago, you were a brand new member of the U.S. House. You had just won in a special election, and you were very kind to a couple of bumbling University of Maryland journalism students who had basically no clue how to work the gear. They had just lugged to your office, and I appreciated the kindness then, and certainly recall it now. So
go
thanks,
Terps.
Thanks very much for your time.
All right, my friend.
We'll be talking again.
Good.
Maryland Congressman Steny Hoyer.